That's the first thing, know that it's going to affect you mentally, and know that while your priority is for sure when you're filming to make it as comfortable for your subjects as possible, know that outside of those times, like really, really take care of yourself.
You are listening to Talk Doc to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping documentary filmmakers thrive. I'm your host and fellow filmmaker, Leah DeLeon, and today's guest is Max Karpman. Max was born in New Jersey, but spent most of his childhood in Moscow, Russia. He is a recent graduate from Chapman University and is the director of Did You Forget Mr. Fogel, a short documentary about American hostage Marc Fogel, who was a teacher at Max's school in Moscow. Today, we're talking about this film, how to find stories in your own community, and how to handle your mental health while filming sensitive topics. Welcome, Max.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have my husband, Matthew, because he was a cinematographer on this documentary.
Hello, folks.
Weird, but I love it. All right, and we are here today in a hotel room because we just screened Did You Forget Mr. Fogel yesterday at the U.S. Capitol.
Beautiful.
So we're here. So for people that have never heard Marc's name before, in this case, can you, as of present day, describe what happened to him?
Yeah. So he's coming back to the Anglo-American School in Moscow for his final year of teaching. It was actually a discussion they had like right before going back, whether or not to go back to Moscow for the last year.
Between him and his wife.
Yeah. But they decided to go back, and it was going to be their final year. Then they were going to retire, go back to Pittsburgh. And when Marc is coming through customs, he gets caught with medical marijuana in his suitcase. And they're looking through his suitcase. They find about half an ounce of medical marijuana. And Marc has like a doctor's prescription and everything. And
It's like oil. It's not like flour.
No, yeah, you're right. It's not flour. It's. I think it was just cannabis oil.
And he's had back injuries his whole life.
Yeah, his whole life. He's had when we interviewed his mom, he said countless surgeries. He's had back issues since he was like 20, and the medical marijuana was an alternative to opioids, and he didn't want to take that because he can't teach on them. Like you take like a painkiller and you're not present. You can't really teach. So the medical marijuana really was kind of his only option because the back pain was really debilitating. We were told stories of he would be at like a baseball game and he would have to like lay down horizontally on the floor or something because his back was so bad. So this was his solution. This was like how he medicated himself so that his back problems would be numbed and he could also still teach.
And then can you bring us up to speed for those who don't know, what's the laundry list of the ailments that Marc's dealing with physically?
So, since he's been in prison, it's like increased, but before he was 60 when he got arrested. So it's a lot of general like old man stuff, for lack of a better term, like when you reach that age. Sure. But it was like the hip problems, knee problems, foot problems. When we were on the phone with him, he said he couldn't feel his foot every time he walked out the door. And
some people might be more familiar with the Britney Griner situation. Can you talk about how it is similar yet different? Like what happened to Britney Griner and how is that different than what happened to Marc Fogel?
Britney did something similar. Like she had cannabis oil or hash oil, I think, in her suitcase because she was a professional basketball player. She was playing in Russia. So she gets arrested in February 2022. Actually, she's only detained for a couple months before she gets her sentencing of 9 years. There's a huge social movement to get Britney home. You're seeing it on all Instagram stories, Free Britney, that kind of thing. There was a huge push within the government to bring her home. And yeah, the State Department and the government felt a lot of pressure to do it. And they brought her home within 10 months. So they did a prisoner swap for Britney. They swapped her with this guy, Victor Bout, who was nicknamed the Merchant of Death. And yeah, he was serving a 25-year sentence in the United States. But so the main differences between Britney and Marc was just notoriety. Britney was famous, Marc was not at all. So he's detained for a year before he gets his sentencing, already in like a Moscow jail, which is already an inhumane place in itself. And then he gets a 14-year sentence, which is, for him, a death sentence because he can't survive 14 years. when the whole thing was that he had medical issues to begin with in a place that not only is bad for his mental health, to say the least, but also he's not getting adequate health care. When he's getting checked into the hospital, they're giving him things that he doesn't know, like injections he doesn't know about. He doesn't speak Russian, so to him it's like he's being like experimented on or something. Like they're just saying, you're going to the hospital now, all these injections. It's a really, really grim situation. So anyway, Marc's been there we're coming up on 3 years now, 2 years since he was sentenced, and there's been almost zero acknowledgement from the US government and State Department of his situation. The main issue is that he hasn't gotten this classification called wrongfully detained. That's a really important classification that hostages get that Marc hasn't been given. So Evan Gershkovich got the wrongfully detained designation, Paul Whelan, Britney Griner, which is good because they all, none of them should be there. You know, they're all clearly being used as political pawns by Russia. But Marc is low profile. There's no notoriety. He hasn't been given that designation, but that designation is really, really important because it gives financial assistance to his family. It gives financial assistance, more importantly, to Marc. So if there's some sort of medical issue, they can get in doctors from outside of the prison system and they can have more consular access, but the State Department has pretty much just neglected to give him that designation.
Yeah.
Right. It's tough. Brittany Griner probably had 4 million people advocating for her on social
Yeah.
media versus Marc had 4.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is a real life issue that's still going on right now.
Yeah, Marc is still there as we speak.
And can you explain the connection that you have with Marc Fogel?
Yeah, so Marc Fogel was a teacher at the Anglo-American School in Moscow. I never had him as my teacher, but his wife Jane was my teacher. She was my 7th grade science teacher. Mr. Fogel, he taught my older sister. And he also taught most of my friends that had stayed in Moscow after I left, because I left in 7th grade. And the ones that stayed throughout high school, most of them had him too.
Mm-hmm. And then give me a quick recap of who Marc was before he was wrongfully detained.
Yeah, so Marc Fogel was a teacher for about 40 years. From like talking to his family, it being pretty clear that this was like his passion early on. This is what he's always wanted to do. So pretty much as soon as he graduated from college, that's what he did. It's actually funny we're here in DC because this was his first teaching job. It was in DC. And after he got detained, people from his first teaching job in inner city DC were reaching out to him and the family, and he had taught them 40 years ago. So, I mean, that just shows like what a crazy, amazing teacher he was. Yeah, he taught all over the world. He was just a teacher, family man, dad, husband, really great guy.
Yeah, I think anybody that had like a really memorable teacher growing up can relate to some small degree, right?
And it's such an important thing, you know, like what you learn when you're a kid. It takes one person that can just influence a kid to go on a whole new path, good or bad, you know? And Mr. Fogel was definitely putting so many people on such a great path.
When the news about Mr. Fogel came out, can you explain when you first heard this and when the idea of maybe making a documentary started to creep in your mind?
Yeah, I actually remember when I first found out about it, my mom sent a link to our family group chat, and it was just a news headline that said, American teacher arrested for drug smuggling in Russia. And this was early 2022, so at this point he'd already been detained for about 6 months. My mom sent, oh no, Mr. Fogel from AS, and my sister was like, oh my God, Mr. Fogel. And the next thing my mom says is, it's probably something medical. I'm sure they're just using it to blow up his case because he's an American. And this article, all it had was the headline and then one sentence that said it was teacher Marc Fogel who taught at the Anglo-American School in Moscow.
So not much info.
Yeah, so because with these kind of things, because like to my parents who like grew up in the Soviet Union, they speak Russian, they like, this is what Russia does. It's like no surprise to anybody. And yeah, I remember we were just talking about like, oh my God, I can't believe that's Mr. Fogel. And this was before he got his sentence, so we didn't really know how bad it was gonna get, but it was just kind of a little bit of worry, like, oh, I really hope this doesn't end up in a bad place.
So when you saw all of this happening again, going back to that moment when you said, I'm going to make a documentary about this,
Yeah.
or what if I made a documentary about this? I think a lot of us have these ideas of like, you see something crazy and you're like, oh, like, should I go for it? Should I do it? And for this particular story, it is huge. It's like, you're going up against the government, you're going up against Russia. This man is, I mean, this is like a very high profile, high stakes type of story. What was the inner dialogue with yourself about like, should you go for this or not?
I think the idea for the doc came almost right away when I heard that he had been sentenced, or not even sentenced, when I heard he had been detained. The idea really did come right away because I didn't really give it much thought, but just like, oh, this would be a cool documentary and just that kind of thing. For context, like I'm at Chapman now. Mm-hmm. This happened when I was a sophomore, and there I'm studying documentary filmmaking. So that's like where my head is at. Like these 4 years of Chapman, that's my major. That's like what I'm learning about all the time. That's what I'm talking about with my friends. Those are my internships. That's just what I'm doing with my time. So like when you're in that headspace, a story comes up and you're like, oh, this would be a good documentary. And you don't really think twice about it. Time goes on, he's sentenced. The whole Britney thing is happening. The social movement, everybody I know knows about Britney Griner. I see her on everybody's story, and not a single person I meet has heard of Marc Fogel. It was very frustrating. Like, I can't be mad at them because it's like, it's not their fault they don't know who he is. I wouldn't know who Marc Fogel was if I didn't go to AS Moscow. But it's just like, if like only you knew what I knew, if you knew who he was, you would be so up in arms about it the way I was. So at that point, time had passed and I realized the documentary would not only be good for me to make a documentary, just for the purposes of making a documentary, because that's where my head was at, but it's also becoming more and more necessary. Like there has to be something people can see, something people can be moved by, something people can relate to make them want to act and do something about it. Just like, we just got to raise awareness about it. So
It's almost like an overwhelming feeling of like, oh my God, if I don't do it,
yeah,
who will do it?
Yeah.
Did you feel like that? Like if you didn't do something, then it's almost a lost cause?
Honestly, yeah, because I felt like I was in a really good, like I felt like I was the person to do it because I had the connection to the family, and I was also entering like my last year of film school, and I'm in this class called Community Voices that's funded by a donor. So we get money to make our projects. We get a budget, which means that
And how much?
the donor gives us $13,500. So, which is a substantial amount
That's
for
like
like
each
film
group.
students, each group, yeah. And there were groups of 4, so yeah, I get in my group of 4, and it's really just, I guess, this is when things started to align. I was like, we should really go for it. You know, we have an opportunity here to do something.
Because you're like brainstorming ideas. You get into a group, and
Yeah.
the group is assigned by the professor.
Well, I actually had the idea before. I
Okay.
actually told the professor the very first day, I remember. So I had actually reached out to the Fogel family like in 2022 when the sentencing happened, but I didn't hear back.
Like a cold email?
The cold email, yeah.
Okay.
Cold email, and I'm glad I didn't hear back because I wouldn't have been able to make a doc at the time, but I was a little too eager to do it. So fast forward a year later, it's 2023, summer before my senior year, so I know I have this class coming up in the fall, and I'm like, really at the back of my head, there's only one thing I want to make a documentary about, and it's Marc Fogel. So I contact them. It was a year ago yesterday, July 22nd, 2023. They had just done this rally in DC, so they were starting to get more press and notoriety, and I pitched them this documentary as something like, I think it could really help bring awareness to the case. But I think for them, what was most interesting was that I was a former student. The family has always been like so appreciative of what the students have been doing for him, and they've always kind of viewed him as like, as the students, as like, that's the voice, like that's who needs to be speaking on Marc's behalf because they have just the best things to say about him.
What did you say in your email? Was it like short? Was it long? Did
It
you
was,
attach
I
anything?
could pull it up actually. It was a super basic, like
So this is cold email number 2.
cold email number 2 after like a year.
The power of a cold email is actually unbelievable.
You have to start somewhere. You have to explain yourself, right?
I think one of the strongest documentaries I'm working on was sparked from a cold email.
So this is what I said. So this is on, July 22nd, 2023. Hello, my name is Max Karpman, and I'm a rising senior at Chapman University's Dodge College of Film and Media Arts in California. At Chapman, I make short documentaries and was hoping to make one about Marc for my upcoming thesis project. I actually went to AAS and I had Miss Fogel as my 7th grade science teacher, and my older sister Masha had Mr. Fogel, which is why I feel very passionate about telling the story. I know the AAS community has really worked to get his name out there, and I think a documentary has real potential to amplify this story on a much larger scale. At Chapman, we receive funding to make these projects, and they often screen at festivals around the country. If this is something that might interest you, please let me know. I'd love to set up an initial Zoom call where I can explain some ideas, hear how you guys would like to get his name out there, and answer any questions. And then I said, I also understand that this must be a very difficult time for your family, and I want to be respectful of any boundaries you might have when talking about it. Let me know. And so yeah, that was my email.
When did you get a response?
Like a month later, actually.
Okay.
Wow.
And so I thought I wasn't gonna get a response, but they were like, Max, this is a great idea. Sorry, we've been so busy with like the rally in DC, but yeah, let's set up a call. And
So you emailed Anne directly?
no, I emailed just Marc Fogel,
campaign.
the campaign, just the website.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who I was
Yeah.
reaching out to.
Sometimes it could feel like you don't even know if people check that email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you get the email back and they're like, yes, we're interested. So let's transition into pre-production, right? So you have the idea, you at least have the initial, yes, I'm interested. And this is in the context of the class, but how long did you have for pre-production, and how did you like approach it?
We had about, I'd say, 5 months. So the first thing we did with pre-production was we established like regular contact with the family. So I would send them weekly updates to Anne and Lisa, Marc's sisters. And I was like, okay, this is what we did this week. This is what we're gonna do next week. And we did Zoom calls, I'd say every other week, and just kind of update them. The main thing we were doing during this time, well, the first thing we did was like, okay, we need to come and interview you. And we scheduled that for December. And it's like September now, we're gonna come interview you guys in December, and you guys tell us just how you feel about everything, pretty much. It was very, very basic. And they're like, okay, we're good. We'll do it around Christmas time. Sounds good.
And they're based in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they're based in Pittsburgh. Well, Anne lives in Montana, but
Okay.
the whole family is based around the outskirts of Pittsburgh.
But you had to travel because the class was in California.
Yeah, exactly. We had to travel. But because it was a funded thing, we were able to do that, which was great. So what we did was kind of unique. For the first 2 months, our pre-production just consisted of like meeting everybody in Marc's network just to get to know him better. So we put out on the Free Marc Fogel, there's a big Facebook group. We put out, hey, we're making a documentary on Marc. If you knew him, please contact me, and we'll set up a Zoom call and we can just talk about Marc. And
Did you record all those?
no, we actually didn't record those. That would have been a great idea.
Yeah.
No, but because we didn't expect to do as many as we did.
Yeah,
I'd
how
say
many
like
did you do?
Probably like 50.
Wow, okay. Mostly students or like friends,
Students,
family?
colleagues, friends. And these were a variety of Zoom calls, phone calls, text messages.
Now, were you conducting this, or sometimes if you weren't available, maybe like your producer was helping?
Well,
or?
it started with like, I was like, okay, guys, we got to get all 4 of us on like a Zoom call. And then it would be like 1 Zoom call the first week and then 2 the next week. And then soon it like really started to blow up. I was like, oh yeah, this is like not feasible. So I tried to be on as many as possible, but like I couldn't make it if it was like before 11 in the morning because I was asleep and I just...
I wasn't busy with the class.
No, I was not busy. This was my senior year when I was like, I thought like the documentary would be just like what I was working on, and like my senior year would be about, oh, like college is done, I'm gonna enjoy myself, this is gonna be so awesome. But it was not like that at all.
Yeah, bad time to have
Hard work.
senioritis. Huh?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God.
Okay, so you had that's smart though. I mean, especially because you didn't personally know him, like you were in the network.
Yeah.
But if you don't know your character, scheduling calls,
Yeah.
literally just with the idea in mind that you just need to get to know him.
Yeah.
I think it's really smart.
And it was so eye-opening that it was during those calls that I realized like each call I had, I felt like the story got bigger and bigger because it made me realize like no one had like a bad thing to say about Marc. They were saying things along the lines of like, he was my inspiration, he was my best friend, I've never met anyone like him, he inspired me to do this. It was really, really, I'd say like profound things that I've not heard people talk about another person. Like I was thinking this whole time, wow, I could only imagine if Marc was my teacher, like how different my schooling experience would have been. And I've never heard anybody talk this way about anybody else. And my first question was like, how is he not famous like for that? For all these students he taught all over the world. Well, that's the thing, like our Zoom calls were with people in like Thailand that he taught 30 years ago.
Around the globe.
With people in Malaysia, people in Oman. He taught like everywhere, and they were all on the Facebook page. They all contacted me. And the first person I talked to in person was Mr. Rudy Bellini. That's his nickname, but his real name is Randy Bax, but Mark and his friend group, they're called like the Bellini brothers. And that's how I was reached out to by Rudy.
Because they drink Bellinis.
Yeah, I don't even know. I didn't
What's a
even ask.
Bellini?
Isn't it a cocktail? I thought so.
That would make sense though.
Anyways, okay.
But Rudy Bellini was just this really, really goofy guy. Mark's best friend from college. He lived in Huntington Beach, which is 20 minutes from Chapman. So I was like, oh, perfect. Like, let me go meet you in person. And he was just like, thank you so much for doing this. Up until this point, he'd just been joking with me for like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, like, isn't your friend in a Russian prison? Aren't you like heartbroken? But he's just like making jokes the whole time. And then like the first serious thing he says, hey, by the way, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like I figured it's like a big deal, but he's like, no, you really have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Like, oh, okay. So we talked for a while. We talked for a while, and what he said ended up to be extremely true. And he was the first interview we set up. So we interviewed him in November, and Mark's high school best friend who lived in Long Beach, California, also 20 minutes from us, like in the other direction. Right. And so we interviewed those two guys in November, and those were the first interviews we did.
And going off, you're getting a big picture of everybody, but then logistically, sometimes it makes sense to interview people that are closest to you.
Definitely.
Location-wise.
We honestly, like, we felt like, how can we not? Like,
right.
we're here, we have our equipment ready. Even if we don't use it in the film, they're 20 minutes from us. It doesn't cost us any money to do this shoot.
Yeah.
So let's do this.
Now let's talk about how Matthew gets into the picture.
Yeah. When during this pre-production process did you call me? I forget.
I feel like it was either late September or early October. For context, I was your guys' intern.
Right.
Yes.
In the fall of
Correct.
2022.
Yeah.
And yeah, on the last day of the internship, you guys asked me, so like, do you have anything coming up? And I was like, yeah, there's this story I maybe want to do. I think I told you guys another story because I had just had to write like a pitch for my documentary writing class. Mm-hmm. And I remember the teacher, like I told her about the Marc Fogel thing. She's like, well, yeah, but like, let's do something realistic. So I wrote a pitch about like some YouTuber I knew.
I remember
it was
that
like,
too.
Yeah, it was like some
yeah.
kind of like low-key boring story.
You did
Right,
like
right.
an example shoot, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Or like I wrote some paper. I don't really remember.
But we like put out an ad saying like we need documentary fellows or interns.
Right.
And then you applied, we interviewed you, and then it was for one semester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so Max was an editor with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then just very memorable to me that you discovered you didn't like editing.
Yeah. This was like our final conversation, like a recap of the internship. It's like, what did you learn? And I was like, I learned that I really don't like editing.
We're like, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
It's good to know what you don't like.
It was very helpful for me. But then and then at the end of that conversation, I was like, well, there's this other thing. There's this like Marc Fogel story, and I told you guys about it, and you're like, oh shit. I remember you, especially Matt, you were like, dude, if that ever happens, please let me know. Yeah. And so yeah, when it like came time, I was like, I got to get Matt on this. Like, we really need professional cinematography, and this would really take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm. What made you say yes?
Well, I was already, after just hearing about the story, I was like, that's unbelievable that you're personally connected also to this person that's literally making history, if you will, by the shit that's happening to them in Russia. And to give some context, right, I've been making like cannabis reviews, vlogs, tutorials on YouTube as the name Cottonmouth Media since like 2016. And I've always had my ears perked for like interesting cannabis related stories. And, you know, I was hearing about all the different stories and I was waiting. And I was like, oh my God, this is like something that I can genuinely get involved with. So it was a no-brainer when Max called me because I was honestly just waiting for it to happen. I was waiting for the call. So
yeah,
no brainer.
It was a total no-brainer, but I don't know. It just resonated, the story.
And
too.
the call happened like a year later. Like, this is a big
Right,
time
there's a big
gap
gap,
we're talking
yeah.
about.
Right,
You know?
Yeah. And is there anything else as far as pre-production that you feel like is valuable to maybe some other filmmakers that you did for Marc Fogel?
I think the most important thing that I reiterate is just like being in contact with the family, because like I knew from the get-go this was going to be difficult for them to do, just to speak on camera about their most vulnerable feelings about the situation and in what a dark place they're in. But they also agreed with me that it was necessary, even if you don't see the family, because like I didn't meet them in person until I came to Pittsburgh 6 months later. Set up consistent contact with them, pretty much get to know them, be friends with them. We also like talked about other things. I would like let them know how I'm doing in school. We had some mutual connection too, which was really crazy. A friend of mine at Chapman was from the same town in Montana that Anne was from, and they knew each other, so that was another small world thing. So just really
just
like,
the more touches and the more like make it feel like you're part of their community instead of just like bothering them all the time.
Yeah, just make them feel like someone they'd like invite over for dinner, you know? Like even if you weren't coming there with cameras, you want to make sure that you guys would just hang out.
And then transitioning to production, now that it's a finished 15-minute documentary, if you were to give like bullet points of like what was production like how many days, how many cities?
Yeah, production was, I'd say like 6 days total, 7 days total. 3 in California, and then we go to Pittsburgh, and that's like the bulk of our shoot. That's about 4 days, and that was interviewing pretty much everybody that we could get to. So it was his 2 sisters, his 95-year-old mother, and his nephew and niece. That was like a really, really powerful, memorable trip for me. I remember it just built up emotionally. So like the first day we get there, we do this photo album scene. That's a really important thing I want to talk about. Like, save your interviews for the end, I would say. Get to know them a little bit. Do scenes where you can get them talking emotionally, but they don't feel like they're on the spot. They don't feel like they're being asked questions. Like we just had them, the very first thing we shot is we opened some photo albums they had and we're like, can you just like walk us through these photos? And that one was really great. It was like,
that was a great scene.
It was a great scene. I was like, oh, this is Marc when he taught in Vietnam. This is Marc when he taught in Oman. And then they're like telling all these stories. Like, do you remember that time like Marc took the kids skiing and he refused to get new skis and like all his ski boots like fell off like one by one, and like, oh, do you remember the time like we went to this like really, really important like event and he like would only wear shorts or like that kind of thing, and it like got them talking, and it was
jogging their
really
memory almost. Like
it was like a really positive.
It was positive.
Reflexive experience for them.
Yeah, and then but then like serious sound bites come out of that too. It's like, yeah, I can't believe it's still going on. And then I remember the soundbite we used. It's like, I always thought he was like the luckiest man alive until this happened. Right. So that was day 1, and then day 2, I believe we went to Butler. That was the most we shot in one day. We shot with his mom, who's 95. Before we even got there, like she was just like, she came in, she like hugged us. She's like, thank you guys so much for being here. We're so happy to see you.
She's so cute.
She's so cute, and she made us soup.
Yeah,
it was really good.
Really cute.
The soup was really good, and she's just like so excited that we were there.
She was very welcoming.
She's very welcoming, like so sweet. We were just like smiling the whole time, even though we were there to like talk about some really serious things.
Right. What other tips do you feel like, speaking about that main trip in Pittsburgh, what tips do you have for other filmmakers, you know, mentally preparing, but also maybe communicating with the family on a sensitive topic? Like how do you prepare yourself and your team to facilitate a nice environment where people can be honest and open?
I did that situation as best I could at the time, but I also made a lot of mistakes. I would say I made the situation as comfortable as possible for the family, but I kind of neglected my own personal feelings. I was like, okay, I'm here to do a job, and I wasn't really thinking about how these interviews would affect me, and I was like, okay, I'll just deal with them like after the trip. Yeah, like that's just the most important thing in documentary filmmaking. What'll make or break your film is how comfortable your subjects feel around you. Because they're not going to want to go as deep as they could.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess your question was more like how to facilitate that experience.
Yeah, no, I guess It's interesting to hear you say, like, you're almost so focused on making it a good experience for everyone else, and then you neglect yourself. When did you start to feel that kind of crumble, or like?
Yeah, I felt it on our last day. So the very last thing we shot was our interview with Anne, who had been, she had been our main subject. She had been our point person the whole time. Definitely developed like a friendship with her.
She was also like the lead on all the
On
media
everything,
stuff, right? Leading up to
everything.
that
She's
point.
like the strong point. She was honestly like in a lot of ways doing what I was doing, where she would just like, I'll take care of myself later. I got to do this media thing. I got to do this documentary. I got to help Mark. And yeah, her interview, like it was just, I don't even know. It was
I
just
get chills
incredibly.
just you like mentioning it.
Yeah.
It was like, I was like scared to do it because we had been with Anne the 4 days prior. We, not just filming with her, we had like gone to dinner with her, we got breakfast with her, like we talked about other things. And, you know, she told us like, hey, like I'm nervous to do this, you know, like this is scary for me. And like, I know. And I know that during this interview, like you're probably gonna cry. I'm probably gonna cry. We're all probably gonna cry in that room, and it's just gonna be so
Heavy.
heavy and
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But
It was cathartic for her, though, I think.
I hope so. Yeah, she came to the place. We set it up. We set this interview up like Navalny style. Like we had a desk in front of her. Her hands were on the table, which was huge because she was like really like talking at us, like to the camera, to the viewer. And the interview was probably like 45 minutes, and she just went through everything, just how it made her feel, what it was like growing up with Mark, how terrible the situation has been to her family, how it's really, really hurt them. And it was just like after the interview ends, we didn't say a word to each other for like probably like 30 minutes. I was just like, so like, how do I even go from here? I was like, the thoughts going through my mind, like, she just spilled out everything she had. Like everything inside, like there was nothing on her mind that she didn't say. There was no feeling that she had that she didn't get out in that moment. She was crying. I couldn't even ask her the next question because I was crying too. It was just an insane experience. Like, and then I was like, how could I possibly like do justice for this woman who's going through such a terrible tragedy? And that interview is what solidified in my mind how terrible of a tragedy this really is. Because it's like, someone dies, like that's a tragedy. Someone dies out of nowhere. That's a terrible thing to happen. But time goes on, you move on, and you can go back to normal. But like when someone is like being dangled like a puppet and you don't know if they're gonna live or die, it's just infinitely worse because you can't move on. You can't do anything normally. You go through the cycles of grief over and over and over again when something happens, and it's just like a really terrible thing for anybody to be put through.
Yeah.
It's just a wound that never heals.
Right.
Yeah.
They keep putting lemon
Yeah.
juice on it.
And now that you have that shared experience of just being like emotionally drained after, 4 days in Pennsylvania, speaking to the family, having that really meaningful conversation with Anne, like, can we talk a little bit about mental health during all of this? Like, you being the director, you're still very much in it. Now you've submitted to film festivals and we screen it at the Capitol. Can you talk about your mental health journey? And then I'd also love to hear about from your perspective too, Matthew.
Yeah, I think the first people, like I knew right away, like I couldn't do this alone. I need to like lean on some people. Like I talked to Sally about it, and that's what she said. Like talk to your group about it. Like lean on them. You shouldn't have to feel. At first I felt like.
And Sally's your professor.
Sally's
just to
my
give
professor.
context.
Yeah. At first I felt like I didn't want to show that this emotionally affected me in front of the group, because I could tell it was affecting them too. And I was like, well, I want to be the leader. I want to be strong. I want them to like, if I like crumble, then how are the rest of us gonna like move forward as a team? But like obviously that's like never the answer. You know what I mean? Like in any situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely I remember like throughout our shoots like in Pittsburgh, like Seth and I would go on a walk and just like talk about everything, and that was really helpful to see that he was on the same page as me, and then that group, that shared experience we had after Anne's with you and Franny and Kaylee, and we just like all talked about how we were feeling. That was really helpful. So it was nice to feel like I wasn't alone. That was the first step.
Not bottling it up.
Not bottling it up.
Yeah.
And I realized like those were the people that understood it the most. So even like when I tried to talk about it, it was frustrating when I was trying to talk about it with my friends because like they knew I was really passionate about it and they were trying to be there for me, but they didn't see what I saw like that week in Pittsburgh, you know? So, and I couldn't verbalize what it felt like and how it was really affecting me. Because it's like one thing to know about a tragedy, because they knew about Marc Fogel, you know, they, like my parents know about Marc Fogel, my friends know about Marc Fogel, they know the situation, but they don't know how terribly, at this point, before the doc comes out, like how terribly it's like destroyed this family. And now that this is something that we all know, and it's so personal to us, because like at this point, we're like friends with Anne
You
and
experienced
Lisa.
it
We
yourself.
experienced it,
Like, yeah.
it has like a effect on you being so close to such a tragedy.
Right, and it's like when you do a documentary, right? I mean, like you've done a beautiful job of it. You really want to become close friends, like damn near family with the people you're making the movie about. But then with that comes the ultimate empathy.
Yeah.
And then that sucks.
And the ultimate empathy, there were times when I wished that I never even started it because it had such a profound effect on me. Like it got really tough at certain points. Like when we were editing, especially in post-production, that's when the pressure really went up. I could see that the film was going to be great. Like I could see that we got all the footage we needed and it all looked beautiful. This shoot was like flawless, by the way. Like I really have to give it to Franny and Kaylee for their production on this, because we had one mistake and it was the the eye direct breaking, and then you solved
that's
that
where I
problem.
came
Leah.
in.
Yeah, that was like
a little celebrity producing moment.
Well, yeah, it was because let's talk about the direct to camera
Right.
approach.
Well, so
you can.
yeah, I brought up the idea to you to do the iDirect or the face-to-face, which is like a knockoff brand version of it. But we wanted it to feel super intimate with each person because we wanted to feel like they're kind of talking directly to Marc, right? And so I suggested that you were open to it. So I flew with my face-to-face, and I packed it several times and flown places. And then, you know, for whatever reason, I didn't open the case until we were literally at Lisa's house about to do the interview. And I open it and I'm like, oh shit, I had put a little like Bluetooth speaker inside of it, and I'm assuming it rattled around in the flight and it smashed the glass. And I was like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? And then so you started.
You called me immediately.
Right. I was like, Leah, I need your help.
Yeah, you're like, hello. And
I
you
was in like
explained
emergency
it.
mode.
Yeah, I remember I was in the car, I don't know, coming back from the gym or something, and I was like, okay, what are our options? Like, how much time do you have before the interview? And it was maybe like an hour or something?
Something like that, yeah.
It was really soon.
And you were like, can you order me a new one? I'm like, I don't think ordering a new one is going to get to you in the hour. So I was like, okay, I remember I pulled off, like I was driving. And so I was like, okay, like, let me figure this out. I pulled into a parking lot. I looked up like Pittsburgh camera rentals or something. Just very quick Google search. Just started calling people like right away. Explain myself like, hey, do you guys have an iDirect? And I knew that the face-to-face, because it's on the cheaper side, like not a lot of camera places
Most
have
people
it.
wouldn't have a glide
They
through
would
thing.
more so have the iDirect. So then I think I called maybe only like 3 places, and ended up getting a few quotes. Was like, this is a student project, hook it up, man.
But it's also like, this isn't like LA, this is Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
It's
I'm in
not like there's
California. I'm in San Diego.
Yeah.
You guys
It's
are
also like a
already there on
suburb of
site.
Pittsburgh, so it's not even like Pittsburgh proper.
This
Yeah.
is like really like kind of middle of nowhere.
Right.
It's some niche shit.
So
Yeah.
then, but the nearest town was Pittsburgh. So,
Yeah.
So I went there, and then I called around, and then I had a few options, but there was someone that had it that day.
They weren't even in Pittsburgh. They were like
Oh, they
far
weren't?
away. They were
Oh.
far away in
It's like a 40-minute
suburbs.
drive, I think.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then, but then we went with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, here's my insurance. Like, we need it ASAP. Like, I'm gonna send, our producers there. So then I like copied the address. I sent it to you guys, and then they immediately drove and picked it up.
Yeah,
right?
Kaylee and
you
Franny went to go get it,
Yeah.
and then we actually did the interview
Without it.
And so we did like this fucky, pardon my English, interview where we just set up the camera and you did your best. I had you sitting like
As
directly
close,
behind
yeah.
it, like looking through the camera to like talk to Lisa. And honestly, Lisa did a great job.
She did a great job.
But like it was definitely like
Okay,
weird.
so you didn't get it for that interview, but you did get it
for Anne's.
For Anne's.
We were supposed to do Anne's that day too, but she just had something come up with her kids and she couldn't do it, which I'm so glad that she
It was a
couldn't do it
blessing.
that day. It was such a blessing. So that's why we pushed it to the last day.
Got it.
But yeah,
Well-
that's a good. I really like your note about. I've also had that realization, even on like branded documentary projects where you only have a day's shoot, but filming with them first, getting a scene in, and getting to know them, it's so helpful.
So important.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a main inspiration for the film was Navalny, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the importance of having reference films and how to choose the right one and then how to make it your own? And I want to take Anne's interview as an example, and you can talk about it as a DP as well.
Yeah, no, this was my first time making a film where I had a really, really strong reference piece because Navalny moved me so much. What I loved about it was it felt like Navalny, like himself, made the documentary in a way because he's talking direct to camera. So it's almost as if like he put the camera down, there was no crew there, and he's like, this is what you guys need to know about the situation, this is what I'm doing. And obviously it's similar themes, different story, but similar themes. Like he was a political prisoner, Marc is also a political prisoner, but to different levels. But Navalny was very much like he chose to do it, and well, not spoiler alert because this is like news, but he died in a Russian prison.
Which was crazy for
crazy.
news. I was like, you know, we were in post-production and I like called you. I'm like, holy shit, did you hear that Navalny died?
Yeah, but it was super, super, super powerful, just along this theme of like, of Russia and what needs to be done about them. But yeah, so
Another
it was
reference
that
film
vibe.
was Don't Fuck with Cats too, right?
Well, actually, it ended up not being a reference film because we had planned like a Facebook group montage that was supposed to be a big part of the doc, because the Facebook group has been their big, like, that's their big source this whole time. But the Facebook group is run by like boomers, in a respectful way. So they're not very well
say that
versed.
with love.
They're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
very
yeah.
well versed in social media. So there's a lot of humor there. It's like people posting like Facebook memes, like it's like their meta avatar like cheering, and it's like, I just joined the Facebook group here to support Marc, and it's like stuff like that.
Okay, got
So
But
yeah, we had an
having a
idea.
reference film, at least then you can always go back to it. You can kind of study it,
Yeah.
analyze it, see.
different parts of it too.
Yeah.
Because Navalny was such a big inspo initially for DP stuff, for how we wanted to shoot it, but then it also became an inspo for our score and for editing too. So I guess it might be rare that you find a film that has all those categories of things that you want to reference.
It just paralleled so much, just the story, right? So
Yeah.
it ended up being perfect.
And yeah, do you want to talk briefly about how you set up Anne's interview?
Yeah, so I mean with a reference, right? Like you're never gonna have the exact same like room, if you will, right? So you always have to, you know, let the room do what the room does in a sense. We were running out of time and locations, so we actually did the interview at the Airbnb that we were staying at, and you know, I had a 600D that I could use to like blast through windows to kind of amplify the light that was already happening in the room, and then I had a 300X for the key source. So we would set up the key source and the 600 outside, and I would blast it I blasted it like through the front door. Yeah, and we just set up the table. Honestly, we like set up a couple different looks in there.
We
feel
did,
like.
yeah.
And then
We tried like 2 different directions.
right, we tried the other way around first. Decided we didn't like it as much, and then we did the setup that we ended up going with. But I had like a negative fill on one side.
We
as
had 3
well.
cameras too.
Yeah, we did 3 cameras on that shoot because we decided because you wanted like there was a lot of the Navalny interviews had like 3 or 4 angles. It looked like I'm not sure if they actually used 3 or 4 cameras in every shoot, but they looked like they did. So yeah, that's what we did. But I really loved the A-cam shot, honestly.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it was just so powerful, and like we really just wanted the framing to feel like similar composition to that Navalny interview.
Yeah, and one of the cameras was like, it was Kaylee, I think. Kaylee was holding it, like she was sitting on the stairs and she was holding it like in between the banisters, so it was like there was no tripod, there was no nothing.
Yeah, we didn't have a third tripod.
Yeah.
That was like our long lens. That was like our 20 to like 120, one of those kinds of lenses, like that goes like really, really long, and it was like zoomed in all the way on her.
Yeah, I think it was my 70 to 200. And I had
Yeah,
her
that
at-
one,
would be-
70
that
to
I
would
had her at
heavy.
200 millimeters. But
Yeah.
it was pretty funny because, right, like the right behind us was like the spiral staircase, and it was like kind of a tight little area. So she was literally like on the stairs, just like holding it steady the whole time. But it honestly, like, you never would have known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Okay, so we talked about pre-production, we talked about production. Let's talk a little bit more about post-production. You and Seth have worked together on a lot of different things. Like how do you cut together a film like this?
Yeah. This was actually my favorite part of the process in terms of like creatively. I really felt like I was getting to work the very beginning of post-production. Everything we did before we even started editing on the computer was all on paper. So we transcribed all of our interviews, all of the footage we had. Oh, but we skipped over just real quick. So
Yeah.
after Pittsburgh, we go to Stanford. We interview the former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFall, and we went to London, where we interviewed his former students. So we got lots and lots of footage.
And I did not go to London.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
But,
R.I.P.
Yeah. But yeah, so we had everything on like multiple spreadsheets. Like, this is Anne's interview. This is everything she said. This is Lisa's interview. This is everything she said. This is everything that was said in the photo album scene. This is everything that was said in the card writing scene.
Transcribing all of those.
Transcribing all of those, finding our best quotes. And then once we have that like on a spreadsheet, we make our paper cut, and we're like, okay, this is like how we want to structure it. And to me, that part was really fun because we were like meeting. I remember we, like, I found out you can like reserve rooms in the library, which like I was a senior finding that out, which is a very common knowledge if you're like a freshman that I probably should have used, but it was cool. And I had this like, we could connect my computer, this is a TV, and we just like, we would be there like all night, like moving around certain sound bites till we got the story the way we wanted it. And then that's when our first assembly cut came, which was like 40 minutes, based on just like literally at the simplest terms, it was a montage of just all of our best sound bites. And then moving on, like we kept refining each cut. Towards the end, we had to make some like really difficult decisions. Like we had to cut Eric, who was the guy, high school best friend we filmed in Long Beach. We had to cut Deb, who is the leader of the Facebook page.
Which is sad because I worked
Yeah.
very hard on the production design
one-
of her interview. Dude.
that
It
one was super
It was
quick.
a super
How do
cluttered
you
office.
know? How do you know when it's time to cut something?
When you have to just like physically cut it and see if it works or not. Because I remember like, this was something I learned like, that was interesting. Like there were so many times when I was like, wait, no, we can't take the soundbite out. Sometimes you just have to cut it because like after you cut it, you're gonna see, oh, I don't miss it at all.
And so sorry, there were sound bites you said that you were like, how could we?
Yeah, there were so many sound bites, and they're like, how could we possibly cut this? And then we cut it, and then it's like, oh, I guess we didn't even need it.
I guess it's okay. Yeah, it's so hard when you were there on set and you got personally connected also to the person. I have this internal dialogue with myself all the time because I'm like, you know, it's actually way harder when you shot it too. So you're like married to your shot on top of it. And so, yeah, it's like, you know, they call it killing your babies for a reason because it's difficult. Yeah. It's difficult to cut stuff.
Awesome. So we've done pre-production, production, post-production, and now let's talk about how the screening at the Capitol went. How did
that
you
happen?
Yeah, how did you make this happen?
So, well, this film, like, from the get-go, what Randy said is, like, you have no idea what you're getting into. In a lot of ways, he meant, like, the mental health stuff, like, this is really going to affect you, which it did. And he also really had a belief that the film was going to do really well, which I didn't have. Like, I couldn't really see how, like, that's what I wanted it to do, but I had no experience in getting a ton of people to see it. But the Fogel family's been working with a lobbyist who has been setting up all these meetings with congressmen and senators. They all know about Marc Fogel, and they're really trying to push for his release. And she was able to set up this screening at the Capitol. And yeah, so
Well, what happened before that?
before the screening?
Yeah, let's talk about super quickly the opportunity that we almost had to go to the State of the Union address.
Yeah, that's right. Oh,
Because that's how you got connected with Vicky in the first place, right?
Yeah, little known fact, but sometime in March, or February, whenever the State of the Union was, they invited Malfine to go, one of the senators.
Right, to like do a panel.
Yeah, to like, she was gonna be at the State of the Union and she was gonna do a press conference about Mark afterwards, and she decided that she was gonna go. So we're like, okay, we're going too. We're gonna like film you. We're gonna film you getting ready, because this would like be a great end to the film. It's like she's going to Washington, she's going to D.C., she's going to like fight for her son, and the professor said no at first, and the production manager of the school said no too. But we eventually convinced them. They're like, okay, fine, you can go to the State of the Union.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Go ahead and make history, man.
Yeah, no, it's like, do you guys really need this, like, for your film? That was like the conversation. I was like, yes. Anyway, so like we eventually go. We're there. Oh no, we don't go. Sorry, we eventually get the approval to go, and then like later that day, they're like, Malfine is not feeling well. She's sick, so she can't make it to the State of the Union.
Yeah, which was, we obviously want Malfine to be safe,
Yeah.
but I was kind of like, damn, that would have been.
Yeah, but I mean, we ended up in D.C. one way or the other, and that
Right.
was through this screening at the Capitol, which is a crazy experience.
Yeah. So then how did that end up coming to fruition?
So yeah, that was Vicky who had set it up. So Vicky was the lobbyist that had been working with the family, and when she came to this screening in Orange in May, and she was really blown away. And what kind of clicked that night for the family and for the whole team behind it is like, oh, we can really use this film as a tool. Like, we can show this to people, they can be moved by it. We can make big events, screenings, we can do all kinds of things with this film, and it can really be just another tool like in our toolbox in terms of freeing Marc Fogel, because it's a whole huge fight and there's so many entities involved, but my role is just with this documentary. And so yeah, she set up the screening. She's like, I'm gonna set up the screening at DC. She said this in May. I didn't really believe it at first, but then like I find out it's confirmed like late June, early July. And yeah, and we're going to DC, and we screened yesterday, and it was really great. It was so amazing. It wasn't so much the screening itself that was the best part of this trip, but it was just like the fact that we got our film to the Capitol, a student film no less.
Yeah.
That what we wanted it to do in the first place is now happening. Like, momentum with Mark is like starting to happen, and like belief is kind of coming back that he will come home one day. And it's not just the film that's doing that, it's everybody that's working, the family, Vicky, all these entities, but like when they combine in this way,
The synergy.
this synergy, it's so important, and the energy can be felt among everybody. So like yesterday was the first time like in a while, like in a few months, that I really felt the positive Marc Fogel energy, because it's been negative for so long.
Wow.
What kind of advice do you have for filmmakers going into a sensitive topic that they know will affect them mentally?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's the first thing, know that it's going to affect you mentally, and know that while your priority is for sure when you're filming to make it as comfortable for your subjects as possible, know that outside of those times, like really, really take care of yourself. Just have people you can talk to about it. You need to find like some way to separate yourself from it. This is another thing I struggled with, because when I get in my work zone, like with anything, I'm sure you guys get this, like you're like tunnel vision, like so focused. So you can edit for hours, days. Like I would literally be editing on like Friday and Saturday nights, like while I'm in college, like a college senior, which was like just ridiculous, because like you're in college, like you should be like enjoying your life. And so even if you're not making it while in college, if you're making it and you're taking time out of other things, like don't do that. Really keep it contained, have your work-life balance, because if the balance is off, which it became for me, it's really, really gonna start to consume you and become your life.
And then you can't be your best.
You
right?
can't be your best. Yeah, that's what's ironic about it. It's like you're stuck in an impasse, and the only thing you wanna do is fix it, but the only thing that will fix it is if you take a break.
Right,
and
it's
you
like
stop for a
obsession
while.
is super necessary, but
Yeah.
it ends up being a crux if you
Yeah.
do it too much.
Yeah, so that's why I got so lucky with the team, and we all were able to like lend tasks to and like take breaks. Like Seth really like pulled all-nighters with the editing. He was in there all the time. And we were also making a whole other film at the same time. Like, I had my own thesis I was making. Franny had her own thesis, plus an internship at NBC.
So much.
And Seth had his own film, too. He was, like, applying for jobs. It was, like, it was so brutal. The last 2 months of college, like, I didn't have a free second for months. And I'm glad it's over now, and I can see it, and to be honest, I don't know how I could have really changed that, because that's just how it happened. But yeah, just like really make sure as soon as you can, you just got to take care of yourself. Just like take note of how you feel. Ask yourself, like, what do I need in this moment? Like if I feel like I need to be editing, but what I really need is to like hang out with friends or like go on a hike or like go to a party or something, like that's what you need to do. And like you come first, like in all situations. So just, you got to remember that.
Right. You cannot be selfless before you're selfish.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never heard that, but I guess that's true.
It's like you cannot be selfless if you are not mentally ready to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to first be selfish and get to a point where you can be selfless. Right. So I always, that's why I love like weightlifting and running, and like I have to unleash the beast when I'm going through something like what we were doing.
Yeah, just have an outlet. Just have something.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Maybe it's a party.
Yeah.
What would you say to filmmakers looking for that next idea? Like they're maybe in school, maybe they're not, and they're trying to figure out that story to tell.
So the best advice I ever got in my whole filmmaking career was you'd be surprised by how many stories are in your own network. And so really take a second, sit down, and think about the people you know, the mutuals you know. Maybe you heard like one time at dinner, your mom was like, "Oh, did you hear about like our family friend from like 10 years ago who ended up like doing this crazy thing," or something like that? Like that is so common. Like people just like gossip. People just like talk about those things. So if you like really pay attention and like listen to what the people around you are saying, you'll find that there is some insane story in your network. And because it's in your network, it's yours to grab.
Right. A lot of times it's your own family.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much you can like find in your own family, just starting there.
And for people that want to support the Free Marc Fogel campaign in general in the documentary, where can they go?
Follow at Free Marc Fogel, follow at Marc Fogel Documentary, join the Freedom for Marc Fogel Facebook page. The social media stuff is huge because we have people working on the political side of things, getting this film and getting the case to the representatives, but we also need the general public to know about Marc Fogel because we need them to put pressure on the State Department to classify him as wrongfully detained and bring him home. So share what we're posting on Free Marc Fogel, follow, share, tell your friends, just talk about him, and we're hoping that we can make him a household name the way Britney was.
All right, let's get Marc home.
Let's get Marc home.
Let's get Marc home. Last thing I wanted to bring up and briefly mention, because I think it'd be potentially an interesting piece of content for us to have. Can you just briefly talk about how Malfine made those, with Vicky's help, big moves to end up talking to Trump, and then how that all kind of had this crazy crossroads with that historical moment?
This is like a huge we could do like a whole separate podcast just talking about the case, like up until now, like without talking any doc stuff. But about like 2 weeks ago, the biggest breakthrough in this entire 3 years in the Marc Fogel case happened. Vicky was able to set up a meeting with Malfine and Trump. So Trump was the highest like profile person thus far that has like actually listened and like talked about the case. So he, before the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the infamous rally, he meets with Malfine Fogel and they talk for like 5 minutes. She's like, "Please, Mr. President, you have to bring my son home. You have to help him." And he's like, "Yes, I will bring him home." She's like, "Please say his name, say his name. Marc Fogel, Marc Fogel, Marc Fogel. I will bring him home if I'm elected president." And he's like, "I have you in my speech. I'm gonna bring you up on stage and you're gonna tell the whole country about Marc Fogel." And then of course, he literally gets shot at the rally. So like this doesn't happen anymore, and it was...
They were like 15 feet away from the stage.
They were 15 feet away, like 95-year-old mother. And the saddest part about this is that morning of the rally, Marc had called. He called his mom, and Vicky was there, and he hadn't called in 3 weeks because he was in the hospital. And Marc was like, "How's it going?" And she's like, "Marc, we have news. We're meeting with like Donald Trump today." He's like, "Oh my God." she's like, do you have a message for him? And he recorded this message, like, please, like, I'm in urgent need of being in my family. I need you to help me come home. And like this message is like passed along to Trump. Trump hears it and everything. And then Trump gets shot.
Trump heard Mark's voice.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And so Trump makes this promise, he gets shot, and Mark finds out in prison like the next day that Trump was shot at the rally. And all he knows is that his mother was there advocating for him, so he doesn't know if she's okay. He like freaks out, he writes, they don't let him use the phone, he like writes a handwritten letter like, are you okay, like, are you okay? And eventually like 2 or 3 days later, he's able to like get on the phone with his mom, and she's like, I'm okay. And he's like, I'm so sorry I put you through this, like, I can't believe it. And that's what's just like crazy, like in this situation, he's still like him, like he's got this guilt. That's what's so crazy to me, like he has this guilt, what he supposedly did. But this is so far beyond him, so far out of his control. He's a victim of the tides of history, you know? There's nothing he could have done about the situation.
He's just so empathetic. That's
He's
why
so
he was
empathetic.
such a good teacher.
And he's been there for 3 years and he still has that. Can you like imagine being placed in the worst place in the world, all your rights taken away, separated from your family, having to like shower once a week in like the cold like prisons of Russia, and you still have empathy and guilt and love for your family and all these normal human emotions in a place that is completely inhumane? Like it's so admirable, and
It's a testament to who he is.
it's a testament to who he is and why he needs to come home.
Well, let's
Wow.
hope this momentum keeps building.
Yeah.
And we'll be surprised in a year where it ends up, right?
That's for
That's right.
sure. That's what
right.
I've been saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, say his name.
Yeah, say his name, Marc Fogel.
Marc Fogel.
All right. Thanks, Max.
Thank you guys.
All right. That's a wrap on today's episode of Talk Doc to Me. If you like what you heard, watch on YouTube, say hello, write us a comment, and we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
Peace. Bye.